Hello, everyone, and welcome to Anatomy of an Adaptation. This is a podcast that aims to compare and contrast classic novels with their cinematic adaptations. I'm your host, Nicolo Grasso, and I am joined once again by the number one King expert that I know, the man, the myth, the legend, the creator and main host of the Uncut Gems podcast, Jakub Flasz. How are you doing, Jakub?
I'm doing well, and I'm kind of slightly embarrassed because I'm pretty sure there are some more number one experts on King's work out there.
I don't know them. They're not here right now.
I'm just a fan. I'm just a fan.
We're both fans. We're both fans. I like that you have taken basically this role as my Virgil, guiding me through King's works, because I've read a few at this point. Every time we talk, I feel like I've read like 2 or 3 more books by King, but it's nothing compared to your history with him and extensive knowledge. So I'm very, very happy to have you here.
Because it's all connected, Nicolo. It's all connected.
One day, 5 years from now, we're going to do a spectacular episode talking about Mike Flanagan's The Dark Tower series.
But when they finally make it.
Well, they will make it. They're getting there. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, first we're going to have to do Carrie, which I'm kind of scared about. But
Like, I'm not rewatching all the adaptations again. Like, I read a 50th anniversary piece on Carrie, and I watched everything that was based on Carrie, and I'm done.
Oh, even Carrie 2?
Carrie 2, the Carrie TV show, the TV sort of movie.
The Chloe Grace Moretz.
The Chloe Grace Moretz. So there's like 4 or 5.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry you went through that. I would not force you to do it again.
It's part of my journey, you know? It's part of my journey.
It would definitely be De Palma and like TV show focus. And maybe talking, could be like a bonus episode. Let's just talk about Carrie 2. Why not? Let's just hurt ourselves. Kind of like what we did with Salem's Lot. Let's just watch everything Salem's Lot, even though it's like Chapel White or whatever it was called. Fun times. But today we're not talking about Carrie. We're not talking about Salem's Lot. We've already done those episodes. Today we're talking about 1979's The Dead Zone and the 1983 adaptation by David Cronenberg.
Everybody's talking about you. You're the talk of the town.
Because I got my head bashed in and I'm still here to talk about it.
Because you have the power of second sight. Is it true, Johnny? The papers won't let up about it.
I keep thinking about a line from a book. It's the legend of Sleepy Hollow, the last thing I gave my class to read before the accident. Ichabod Crane disappears. The line goes, as he was a bachelor and in nobody's debt, nobody troubled their head about him anymore.
Is that what you're afraid of?
That's what I want.
I'm very curious, Jakub, what are your thoughts on this book? Because I'm pretty sure you... What's your history, actually? Did you read it for the first time just recently? Was it something that you kind of grew up with, as we talked about with other King books?
Full honesty, this, like, when I was growing up, this was a book I kind of sort of ended up avoiding.
Okay.
And for the stupidest reason... Because as like a 12 or 13-year-old, when you start getting into that kind of stuff, and even though you're not supposed to be reading it, because like books didn't come with like an 18 rating, like they're not rated by BBFC or MPAA. There's no such thing. Like you can just pick up a book and whatever, right?
That's why they're dangerous.
It is kind of dangerous. Like, you know, like your parents have to be just like, oh, I'm not buying this for you, but like you can't stop me from going to the library. I mean, the librarian could.
True.
But you know, and they didn't care, so I was just reading whatever, and just going by the sort of the back of the cover blurb, I was like, this is not what I want to read because it's not supernatural, because I was into horror stuff. So I was reading like Cujo, Firestarter. I was reading, you know, Carrie and whatnot, and Christine, and then The Shining and Salem's Lot. I read these because like that's about vampires, that's about ghosts, that's about whatever, that's about this, that, and the other, right? And I know
this is about a man who has visions.
And I was just like, it's like a political, and it was actually marketed as a political thriller. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do this. And then when I just got slightly older, and I just read like Dolores Claiborne and Rose Madder and whatever, and these are a little bit more sort of, let's just say, ambitious. But this one kind of then just drifted into distant memory. So now I'm on a I want to say like year 2 or of my sort of slow journey through reading everything in order and watching every single adaptation based on these books. I have picked it up finally, and I also coincided with you saying like, "Hey, do you want to do the Dead Zone with me?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just reading it."
Good timing.
So good timing. So yeah, so my history of it is very very fresh in a way. So I came to this book as an adult, a grown ass man. So, and I really like it. It's kind of one of those kind of mature books. I think, like historically speaking as well, it's kind of one of those where that he wrote. I mean, there's a history behind how he wrote it, but I think it's like I see this almost as a can I prove to myself that I'm not a horror writer kind of book, you know? Because this would follow like The Stand and The Shining.
Night Shift, also
And-
collection
and
of
Night-
stories.
Yeah, and although Night Shift was kind of like a collection of short stories that he had written like years and years before,
Yeah, true.
you know? So they just collected them, and I think Night Shift must have been like I want to say, either the last book published by Doubleday, because he was changing publishers at the time as well. So that was the first. The Dead Zone was the first book he published officially with National American Libraries or New American Libraries, because they really gave him like a sweet deal. Like they paid him $2.5 million to move from Doubleday.
Nice. Nice deal.
You know, so
In
So
like
there's-
1979, 78 money.
Yes, yeah, it's ridiculous money, right? But this was a book he was kind of writing. Like he was struggling to finish a book as well, and I think concurrently with this he was also writing Firestarter because he was just like, oh, I can't get into this. So he was writing like this thing originated. The Dead Zone originated as a story. Like there is a subplot in this about Frank Dodd, the sort of the I'm So Slick killer.
Yeah.
Which I actually pulled out a quote on, which is I really like his vision about how he's but there's a the whole concept of this book was kind of around that, this sort of like this psychic who's then trying like helping the sheriff track down a serial killer, right? It was kind of more of a genre sort of piece, right? And then he goes like, I don't know. He's just like, and he starts writing Firestarter, which is again like politically CIA sort of inclined. And he comes back to this with this idea of like, what if we could just go back in time and kill Hitler? So that's kind of how. And I reading this now, I thoroughly recommend it to anyone now. Read this, thinking that this is a guy. This is a guy who wrote a book. I think because he was thinking about like he was really afraid of Reagan.
Understandably so. You know.
But if you read this book now and just imagine that Greg Stilson is Donald Trump, and
The parallels are there.
it's
More ways.
uncanny. A political outsider, populist, bullshitter, and also kind of sort of weirdly criminally connected as well. Very dodgy past, you know. And I like this book.
Fantasy where
But you know, like
a scandal would ruin his career.
yeah,
Which is not the world we live in right now. Like the 80s were a different time.
Yeah.
It was more optimistic, you know.
So long story short, this is kind of one of those where I think, I mean, we might my thoughts will emerge once more when we talk about the movie, but I think what I really like about this is this idea of like how King kind of makes this movie about this sort of Americana, you know, because it is also like a biography of a guy who didn't exist, because you go through his life almost, right, and how and you just intertwine all these different lives, how they kind of come in and out of existence, right, but it kind of feels almost like a I don't know, genre sort of infused John Irving book. You know?
I can see that.
So I kind of like it because there's a lot of like regionalities, because I think this is I want to say first book after The Stand. So the first book he wrote after moving back to Maine, because he was traveling around the country, like, you know, The Shining he wrote in Colorado, and The Stand was also written kind of sort of around in Colorado, and even The Shining and The Stand kind of end with characters moving back to Maine. So it's kind of like, we're back home, baby, and he's kind of really celebrating this sort of the working class Maine, and the religiosity of people living in there. This comes back, like like Johnny's mom is kind of like that. And like you read
There's
this and
cliches and tropes that.
oh yes,
plenty
It's-
of them.
it's very much kind of like an early omnibus for
Yeah.
King fans to kind of just go and pick out these little nuggets of like, here's your like Carrie White's mom character, here's this guy, here's
Castle Rock.
there's Castle. I think that's the first book where
I believe so.
Castle Rock actually officially becomes like a part of the story.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I really enjoy it. Yeah, it's a fun book. How about you then?
I agree. I also came to this book basically because I'm trying to do the same thing you're doing, minus actually
Minus
watching
TV shows and stupid.
minus TV shows, minus 6 seasons of the Dead Zone. But I want to, because I've always loved Stephen King. We talked about it before. Like Carrie was my first King book that I ever read back in 2012. I want to say. So I want to read more of his work, and you inspired me to actually go chronologically and follow this order, kind of like reading one every, like 3 or 4 of his books every year, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I reached the Dead Zone, and I went into it having already seen the film. I watched it 8 years ago, almost to the day when this episode comes out. It was April 2018. And I was not expecting it to be structured in the way that it is. I think that's the biggest surprise for me. Because I say this with a lot of love. It is a very meandering book.
Yep.
Like some of the best King novels are. But it just starts off with following Johnny Smith when he's really young. And you are jumping from character to character, sometimes not even really knowing what's going on. One chapter you are in the POV of the serial killer. One chapter you are following Sarah, this like the first girlfriend, true girlfriend of Johnny, who then ends up getting married after he has the accident and stays in a coma for a long time. And it is truly one of those books where you have to be along for the ride. I think you agree. Just like you don't have to. And it's something that applies to most of King, we could even say. You should not be reading a King book for plot. You should be reading a King book for characters, for atmosphere, occasionally set pieces, but you should not be coming here like looking for a plot necessarily.
Although,
like, knowing the way it was put together makes so much sense because it has that energy of like, oh, I really want to focus on this stuff, but it's not enough to sustain a full book. Maybe a series of books, who knows? And then just like repurposing it so it shifts gears in the second half. But it does it successfully. I think it all ultimately really works really well, especially because it feels more mature than the other books that he's written prior to this, in the sense of, you know, is becoming more overtly political. We talked about The Long Walk last year.
Yep.
And that was already a political book, but he was still young and very angry and very passionate. And in here, he's already starting to get more involved, even behind the scenes. I want to say like the Rage debacle was around this time, right? When they started pulling it off? No. Was it
Rage was
early 80s maybe? When they started pulling the book back, something like that.
I think so. I think there was an incident. There was a school shooting at somewhere where Rage was pulled back. But yeah, there's Roadwork is a political book. That's Bachman. That's also around the same time.
Yep.
And also, like, you can see, like, the guy used to be a political activist as a student as well. Like, he would go on these anti-war marches. He looked like just like the Unabomber. Sometimes I was thinking, like, the massive beard, hair, and everything. He looked like he just lived in the forest and just made gelignite sort of toys. But you know, like when you're saying like this book is kind of like character based, yes, but in contrast to many of his books that he's written in a way like he's putting characters in a predicament and seeing where they are going. He calls this book plot driven because he started with the end in mind, as in like, what if I could go back in time and kill Hitler? So like, you know that you're working towards this climactic resolution or a decision that someone needs to take matters into their own hands and see if they can affect the future outcomes for the entire world, for instance, right? So he knows that he's working towards an ending in contrast to literally everything else that he's ever written. You know, because like, that's always been the accusation that his endings sometimes would be either coming out of nowhere because he goes like, that's enough of that, let's just wrap this up, or they will just fizzle out into non-existence, or they will be like weirdly out of step with anything that came before them, because they come either naturally or or he just goes like, I think we've gone at this for like 800 pages, or someone says like this ending's kind of stupid because we're going nowhere, so the editor is gonna go and say like, need to change this, you know.
And it's weird, like I still haven't really encountered one of those endings, so I wonder if they start popping up during
In the 80s, I think you'll see more.
the cocaine years.
I think you see like these resolutions in like It, where it kind of becomes a little bit more. You can kind of sort of see it in The Stand.
Good.
You can see some of it in The Stand, where certain things kind of, they look like they're working towards something massive, and then what comes about doesn't necessarily live up to the build up.
Mm-hmm. True. Fair. But I agree with you that that zone is not really that case, and
Yep.
even in its meandering, even in all of that, I'll just say like very bluntly, I like Johnny Smith.
Yep.
I like following him. I like his inner conflict, the idea of this man who, after this coma and car accident, wakes up and has the ability of having visions of the future. It could be the near future, it can be the far future, it can even be visions of the past, just visions in general whenever he touches people. And he that really doesn't want to have this power, and everyone wants to take advantage of it. There's religious repercussions related to his mother, the way she sees it as like this divine gift, a miracle. There's detectives that want to use it to solve crimes. There's like hokey journalists that want to take advantage of it to write like columns for advice and whatnot. Making money and profiting off of people's desperation, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And he really does not want any of that. He really wants to reinvent himself. He wants to live his own quiet life. He was non-ambitious. He wanted just to be a teacher. He was very content just teaching high school students, talking about literature. Again, Stephen King trope. The lover of literature, good professor that everyone loves. So it's very easy to like him. And the way he gets progressively more disturbed as the book goes on. He has this cancer essentially that's threatening to kill him closer to the end, that leads him to pursue this political act of violence that ultimately does not go in the way you might expect. I do really like the ending of this book, and I do primarily like the book because of Johnny Smith. Even if it does get to a point where it's like, okay, why does this book need to be this long? A little bit. There's a couple of parts where it just like goes on and on and on, but it was still very enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a question here, like, why does this book need to be this long? I think like you've answered this already, because like the plot is kind of secondary to this, even though like you're working towards a resolution, but it's about the journey of this guy. Essentially, like the guy's name is John Smith. He's just a guy, so you kind of, I think,
more average than that.
I think I'm not sure how much of an accident versus pre-planned, or at least somehow conceptualized this was. You can't turn an average Joe into like a political actor overnight.
Mm-hmm.
So because it would look out of character for him, right? Like all of a sudden he just like, I don't know, touches a guy and he goes like, I'm gonna buy a fucking gun. I'm gonna sort this out. Like this is supposed to be brewing, and also on top of that, like introducing this too early in the narrative also would look convenient. Mm-hmm. You know, so you kind of have to just, and that's kind of how I like this book, because he started with this, like, you don't know where it's going, because like the first sort of part of this book, the little prologue, is essentially like 3 or 4 things. Like there's you see the serial killer, you see Johnny, you see Greg Stilson killing a dog.
Yeah, brutal. Yeah. It was like 15 or something, very young.
Yeah, so you can see all these elements of foreshadowing essentially. And then you have to kind of just work them in. Like there's even like a scene that you don't understand why it's there, about this guy visiting a bar and selling like lightning rods.
And I wanted to say, because you mentioned it, years ago you recommended me Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury.
Yep.
And I was reading this alongside the Dead Zone, and I was screaming. I was like, oh my god, there's so many references, almost too many. There's like, it's kind of cheeky and cheesy, that at the end there's like the guy is like, yeah, picked up this girl and like I told her to read Something Wicked This Way Comes, like super cool act to do. But anyway, it was fun to see those references.
Yeah.
The lightning rod salesman that just appears and vanishes.
Yep, yeah. Like a weird agent of almost like magical realism, right? And you kind of have to always just take this as like par for the course, right? Like that Stephen King looks at Ray Bradbury the way, say, modern genre writers look at Stephen King.
Yeah.
Like he's incredibly influential for him. Maybe he's not as influential now because this passage of time has made it so, but he's like considered one of the classics, right? But he was a very popular, incredibly popular author at the time. Right? So he would look at Bradbury and just would be just like just devouring his work, right? So you see all these elements kind of just sprinkled every so often, and they have to kind of just naturally work their way towards Johnny's life, you know, so that they would kind of converge with his life somehow. And it has, like, if you do it too quickly, it would just look convenient. And I think the idea would be for this book to look like a story of a guy's life that's almost interrupted by these sort of supernatural elements. Because if you don't do it that way, if you just place the emphasis on these supernatural elements, just like we have to quickly get to the point, then you actually just turn this book from a life story turned political thriller into essentially a science fiction novel, like a fantasy novel, right? And I think he wanted to avoid that. He wanted to almost keep this sort of the fantasy element at arm's length, you know. That's just, let's keep it real.
Yeah, and we had this conversation when we were talking about Salem's Lot a year ago, that basically he got to that point very early in his career where he had to decide, you know, like, oh, do you want to reinvent yourself as just a writer who writes books of different genres, or otherwise will you just stay the horror writer, the master of horror? And the Dead Zone kind of feels like almost trying to refuse that title, or like show without going the Bachman route, without already going for more classical dramas. But I would barely, outside of, honestly, listening to you speak earlier about your introduction to the book, I think probably calling it a political thriller might be the best way to go about it, because calling it science fiction almost oversells it for what actually happens in the book.
Yep.
And it's not a horror. There's like barely any horror element in here outside.
Well, the Frank Dodd sort of subplot.
Like, closer to what you'd seen, not Richard Harris. What's the name? Thomas Harris, like the Silence of the Lambs. I forget. Thomas Harris, I think.
Thomas Harris, yes.
Yeah. And it feels closer to one of those, like crime thriller type sequences than straight horror. It is horrific. This gets brutal in its descriptions of murder and assault, especially mostly, I want to say, if not all of the victims were underage. It's very upsetting, so beware if you're going to read this book while listening to this conversation, you know, if you're tempted. Trigger warnings. But I also really like that. And it's also honestly something I always say whenever we talk about Stephen King, but I always really commend him for not going the easy route with the scares, with the characters, with the plot. He's just following his own, you know, he's going to the beat of his own drum type thing.
Yep.
Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, if you were to write down the structure for like a conventional novel, like, okay, this is like, let's say, a generic novel, and you talk about the Dead Zone, so many editors, so many other writers will say, why are you doing it like this? Why are you doing it like that? Do we need this part? Do we need that part? Cut. And you turn it into something much leaner, but also it loses its magic in a way. I do like that it reveals itself to you. And it's not, it almost feels like whenever you can connect some dots, it feels nice. You know, right? It's as simple as that. It's like, oh, I get it now. Now I understand what we're doing.
Now I understand why I was struggling for 7 pages with this. Like, why is he here?
And then we just see him again. It's like, okay, fine. I think it will make sense, hopefully, and it does. And also, it all works well with the climax of the book, or not even the climax, like following, let's say, the denouement, the epilogue. When you get all of these accounts, when they're essentially Johnny Smith dies trying to kill Stillman, But by trying to do that attack, still not ruins his own chances of ever becoming the president of the United States because he uses a baby as a human shield. And there's photographs taken of him, and this whole thing goes to court, and there's testimonies about Johnny Smith and how he impacted the people around him, and that whole part was really sweet. It's almost the anti-Carrie, where Carrie is as like a lot of those testimonies throughout the book, and it's all mostly dark. It ends on a very sour note. And this one, it feels like the opposite of it. It's like, he did so much good. He was such a good man, and he helped out, and he saved lives, and all of that. Even the ending itself, where you have Sarah going to the grave and like leaving the flowers and still feeling his presence with her in a heartwarming fashion. I was like, oh, it's like the flip side of Carrie's ending, from like the film.
Because it's, you know what it is? Like, I see this as like a Clint Eastwood ending.
Like Unforgiven, you mean? Or
No. These sort of the testimonies. This is like, you watch a biopic, and this ends on something, and at the end of like, you see these sort of flashes of text of like, this is what happened to this guy, this is what happened to that guy, this guy went to live for, like, we talked about Air recently, right? On my show, and you can see all these sort of like elements of biography that we just decided to not include because our story ended here, So you almost like, because again, like, Stephen King is a very cinematically inclined writer because he first watched the Bambi before he picked up a book. I think that's kind of, you'd probably see it that way, that he's from a generation that was raised with a TV in the living room, and then with an adolescence at driving theaters, right? So you could see that this is an element of that, as in, like, this is how movies end. It
feels cinematic. You can feel almost like the camera pulling back on a crane shot in the graveyard, the sunrise or sunset or whatever, just like in the sky.
Or you can see almost like a montage of like, like just the
faces of all the characters.
Or even the sort of like a biopic version of this would probably end on the sort of the assassination, then the way sort of the Cronenberg film ends, but it would kind of go into this montage of, like, court cases, or maybe some shots of like front page news. I mean, the film kind of goes through like a cover of Newsweek, right? Which, just by the way, like, I have to say, like, the way Martin Sheen uses a baby as a as a human shield is just
flailing around.
And also, like, from the perspective of now, I probably find it cute because I think that, like, he forgets that, like, if if this guy was like a MAGA populist, this wouldn't really stop them. They'll be like, no. Stop, like, we can totally excuse any kind of behavior now.
The baby
was a lefty.
Could do anything. We need the president.
The baby was a lefty, kind of deserved to go,
Before we actually transition into the film, I'm curious if you have any passage or quote that really stuck with you. I can go first in this case. Mainly because, again, I had watched the film before going into the book, and I was not expecting 50 pages in, like in the first part of the book, before the accident, to really be caring so much about Sarah as a character. And it's kind of a shame that she's, understandably so though, she is left to the side for the majority of the book afterwards, but those opening chapters where you're seeing things from her perspective and she's thinking about her previous relationships, how they were not particularly great, and then she's really connecting with Johnny. There's this part where she says, or like where, the writer, Mr. King, writes, she suddenly realized she was sitting in an apartment by herself late at night, eating an apple and watching a movie on TV that she cared nothing about, and doing it all because it was easier than thinking. Thinking was so boring, really, when all you had to think about was yourself and your lost love. There's so many nice passages in that part, and it's always a reminder, and especially like when you get to the end and the last passages of the book are also lovely. King is a softie, and I like when he goes full soft.
I see your quote here, Irasian, because this is, I pulled like 3 passages just in case, and then one of the ones I pulled is exactly kind of like a response to what you said.
Please.
It's kind of like from the encounter. So when she comes to his house later on with the baby, and she's like, they talked of inconsequential things. There was no hurry. For the first time since he had come out of it, Johnny felt that time was not his enemy. Time had provided them with this little air pocket in exchange for the main flow, of which they had been robbed, and it would be here for as long as they needed it. They talked about people who had been married, about a girl from Cleves Mills who had won a merit scholarship, about Maine's independent governor. Sarah said he looked like Lurch on the old Addams Family show and thought like Herbert Hoover. And they both laughed over that. And this kind of then proceeds into them kind of just very embarrassingly just transitioning into how about we have sex, you know? But this is kind of like a drama moment, almost like a very, again, like King is a softie, right? Like, you know, this is a guy who can just show you in exquisite detail how vampires take people apart, right? He goes like, no, let's stop over and just essentially have a John Irving moment.
And it works. It works.
Yeah.
It's you know, technically cheating, but the way he presents it makes sense. It's like, you know, they're making up for lost time, and let's pretend for one moment that your accident never happened and we actually ended up being together that night, that one night, fateful night many years ago. It's nice. It's a nice moment. Do you have other passages you wanted to read? Or
I've got one about his visions, because like this idea of, and this is something that I latched onto as well, because there's a way in which like King writes internal dialogue, and he writes internal sort of experience as well. That, you know, almost kind of maybe like some people call it infantile or maybe very hacky, because like he has a lot of critics, as in like, oh my god, because this guy's so successful and he writes stuff that everyone wants to read, therefore he's probably stupid, right? And he didn't do himself any favors either when he like, and I can't remember whether it's like a People magazine or maybe Newsweek article or something, like some kind of interview. He said like his books are like a Big Mac and fries, and everyone's like, I told you he's a hack. He writes junk. I'm like, he goes like, no, they go down smooth. That's what I meant. You know, they're not. But if you eat too much of this in succession, it's not going to be very good for you either. So you know you have to. But the intention was that he's very easy on the uptake, and that's kind of part of his success. You can pick up a book and you go like, oh, I like this, you know, like what else has he written, you know? But there's this sort of way he goes about things. Like you can see it in The Shining, you can see it in to a degree in Salem's Lot as well, and a bunch of his later books. But the sort of idea of like how he touches things and he becomes the person he's observing, essentially. It's a very sort of voyeuristic way of looking. So there's a passage from when they go into this gazebo, because Sheriff Bannerman just asks him to go and touch things to see if to find the strangler, right? The rapist strangler, and he goes like, that's kind of how I find it interesting, because there's a lot of parentheses, there's a lot of sort of italicized sort of text, like dark tree branches etched against the grey snow sky like runes. I am sitting here smoking, waiting, feeling good, feeling like I could jump right over the roof of the world and land lightly on 2 feet, humming a song, something by the Rolling Stones. Can't get that, but very clearly everything is what? All right, everything's all right, everything's grey and waiting for snow, and I'm slick. Johnny muttered, I'm slick, I'm so slick. Bannerman leaned forward, unable to catch the words over the howling wind. What? Slick, Johnny repeated, like coming out of it, like slick. He looked up at Bannerman, and the sheriff involuntarily took a step backward. Johnny's eyes were cool and somehow inhuman. His dark hair blew wildly around his white face, and overhead the winter wind screamed through the black sky. His hands seemed welded to the bench. I'm so fucking slick, he said clearly. Like you can see how like he can just easily put me in a position where I can flip between two consciousnesses.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I've always admired about the guy's writing, because in a way it's very clearly denoted what's internal monologue and what's not, what's someone else's thoughts, what's his thoughts, but it also comes together cinematic and visual. So that's kind of how I pulled this quote. Like I looked at like 3 or 4 different visions, and this one's kind of like the most interesting, because he puts himself in the feet of a rapist killer, right?
It's not just witnessing it, but it's becoming.
It's almost participating in it, right?
Bordering on possession.
Yep.
which is very different from how the film approaches it. The Dead Zone 1983 was directed by David Cronenberg, and it stars everyone's favorite Christopher Walken as Johnny Smith, Brooke Adams plays Sarah, Tom Skerritt, I forgot he was in this film, plays Sheriff Bannerman, and of course, Martin Sheen plays Greg Stilson.
Martin Sheen looks like Nicolas Cage in a fat suit.
Oh, I can kind of see that.
You know, like
Exaggerated mannerism.
yeah,
Well,
just slightly chubbier Nick Cage.
slightly chubbier Nick Cage. This was my second time watching this film. Of course, the first time watching it after having read the book, and I liked it back then. I came to it not as it's a King film, but I came to it as I'm going through David Cronenberg's filmography. And it was slightly disappointing in that sense. It is a studio film that is primarily an adaptation of a Stephen King book. At the time when Stephen King was hot money, everyone loved him, everyone wanted a piece of the pie. And Cronenberg had to prove himself to be not just this quirky horror director from Canada making sleazy films, but he was actually, someone that Hollywood could rely on to deliver an actual solid film. So it doesn't have many of Cronenberg's usual qualities, even his tone, I would say, to a certain extent. There are moments where you're like, oh, this, you can feel his hand on top of it. But overall, I have to say, I actually feel, which is very rare for this podcast and in general, I feel the same now as I did back then. It's a film that I like overall. I think it's an enjoyable watch. It's not long, it's like an hour and 40 minutes. It goes by fairly quickly. But also, it is an hour and 40 minutes. It goes by too quickly. A lot of what makes the book special, the characters, the languid pacing, all of that is completely sacrificed in favor of just, hitting the bits. There's barely any actual difference. It's another one of those rare cases where it's like, yeah, this is basically the book if you were to narrow it down to its essentials. But it's missing its heart in a way that makes me actually love the film. And I'm not too sure about some of the casting. We'll get into it. I'm curious, Jakub, how is it for you? Your thoughts on this film?
Oh my! I feel like this is where I'm kind of like a broken record, because every single time I come in here, I end up shitting on the film. And because they don't, with very few exceptions, I want to say there are some exceptions, and I've written about them too. Like Life of Chuck, I really loved, for instance, right?
Yes.
But Jesus Christ, is this movie missing the point? It's just like and like when I then read up on behind the scenes what happened, I'm like, I'm starting to understand why.
Okay.
Because, like you said, this was a. This book comes out and someone goes, yeah, we need to make this into a movie. And I think this was kind of held by Lorimar Pictures. So it was adapted by a guy named Jeffrey Boehm. I don't know if you know the name. He wrote. This is fairly fresh memory for me because on Uncut Gems, but we just recorded Inner Space, and he wrote Inner Space for Joe Dante, but he also wrote a few Indiana Jones films.
And The Lost Boys, okay.
And The Lost Boys. And The Lost Boys is an interesting King connection because The Lost Boys is a clearly King-inspired vampire film.
Yeah.
And he wrote The Lost Boys, right? So he's kind of in that sort of zone, right? Even with that, so the Dead Zone, just the title makes an appearance in the film, kind of like, I don't know, 20 minutes before its end. Almost like, oh shit, we need to make sure that this title makes sense, right? But it's the story was kind of like, well, no one really liked. No, first of all, it was developed, I think, by a film arm of essentially a studio making ABC movies of the week. So that's kind of like this is where the ceiling is. I mean, fair enough. They had done The Postman Always Rings twice. I think they did The Officer and a Gentleman. So they had a few hits on their hands, but they eventually kind of folded because they had also a lot of bombs, right? But then Jeffrey Boehm writes a script. Dino De Laurentiis buys rights to this movie, and he hates this script. Stephen King writes his own script, and De Laurentiis hates it even more. They commissioned Andrzej Żuławski, who writes a script in Polish, gets translated into English, and then translated into Italian, and then De Laurentiis says this is even worse, so they hire Jeffrey Boam back. So it's almost like you can see, like, you're on like 5 drafts, and I think the first draft that Jeffrey Boam wrote was essentially a slasher. Like, it was essentially like the first sort of idea of this book, as in like the Frank Dodd sort of story. And then, they were writing this film for Stanley Donen to direct. The Singing in the Rain guy. You know? And then he bows out, and then Michael Cimino comes in here. Also John Badham was also involved, and he bows out, and then Michael Cimino comes in, and he bows out, and they gave it to Cronenberg as a measure of last resort almost. And
Sure. Why not?
so it's a movie that I think it's one of the only movies, or maybe the first ever in Cronenberg's career, where he had absolutely nothing to do with the script. He was a hired hand, and you can see, because I'm looking at this, I'm like, they hired David Cronenberg and put him in a box, as in like, you don't do your usual things. And I think this was also probably maybe somehow influenced, because Dino De Laurentiis also, was a producer who's incredibly influential over his directors, as in like, he would insist on things, and he would make sure that these things are done the way he liked them.
Or everything I talked about with Dune and David Lynch. Also around this time, actually, I want to say, like mid 80s.
Yeah, so there's like, he messed with like Conan sort of sequels, whatever. There's a whole history of how Dino De Laurentiis would just change things in terms of, well, I think he also
would get in the way.
He would get in the way as well, and he got in the way because also before this movie came out, or as it was being made, Videodrome became a bomb.
Okay.
And I think this may have been just one of the reasons, or like, no weird shit, David, kind of rule, because there's like, you watch this film as a David Cronenberg film, it's kind of like watching Music of the Heart and experience like, why is this a Wes Craven film? It's a very odd experience for me, because I actually don't like the film for many reasons. First of all, because as a David Cronenberg film is a failure. It's like, there's very little Cronenberg in here.
Yep.
And as a King adaptation, it's even more of a failure, because it's like an abridged Reader's Digest version of this book. Like, just look at this book, okay, well, this needs to go from here to there, and what's the least amount of plot and character we need to get us there? And it's almost like it's 200 miles an hour sort of storytelling, and we just transition into little episodes of like, oh, now we're going to here, now we're going to that. Like, if you hadn't read the book, this movie makes zero sense.
Well, I remember it felt just episodic. That was my feeling the first time. I mean, it was confirmed rewatching it, but even the first time I remember thinking, oh, okay, oh, this is going to be like a detective story. Oh, it's done. Oh, okay, now there's this political element. Okay.
Yeah.
Constantly changing in a way that works in terms of pacing. Like, that's the only real positive I have with that. As I mentioned before, I do find it enjoyable in the sense it's like, yeah, it's an hour 40, it just goes by quickly.
So he killed 90 minutes
through you.
Yeah.
It doesn't have that emotional impact that it should have, that the book has.
Yeah.
Despite trying to force, like, for instance, Sarah is much more present in the film. And I do like Brooke Adams. I think she's just lovely, and she was delightful, but she has no presence here.
Oh,
it's like
absolutely.
Kind of a thankless role.
Yeah.
Most of the characters have thankless roles. Like, you have Tom Skerritt, and he has no lasting impression.
Yep.
Rather than just being like, oh, I forgot you were in this. Oh, you're gone. Bye.
It's a very short episode, right? And this is something that you actually need to flesh out somehow. It's either you flesh it out completely and turn this into a 4-part miniseries, or pick one thing out of the book and concentrate on it, right? So, like, fair enough. Like, if this needs to be a political thriller and just end with this sort of idea of assassination, just concentrate on this. Introduce Greg Stilson early in the game, and show me that Christopher Walken's character, that Johnny Smith, goes through a change, because he flips on a dime. He goes like, he shakes the guy's hand, goes home and finds a gun.
When you were mentioning that before, I was like, "Oh, this reminds me of the movie."
That's exactly what happens, right? He goes like, he shakes the guy's hand, and you can see like this sort of like movie of the week, sort of say like, the missiles are flying.
I also I don't want to blame him directly, but I do think one of the problems is definitely that King had more of a hand in this, probably scared because of how The Shining went and everything related to that. Because this feels very much like you were saying. We don't know. Maybe they're floating around somewhere, probably, but we don't know really what the other screenplays were like. But I can see them being either very different, or actually, like you mentioned, trying to focus more on some of those elements.
Like the one Bohm script I know was more about Frank Dodd. And actually Frank Dodd is an interesting character because he makes an appearance in other books. Like
Let's see which ones.
Cujo,
Okay.
there's he's not like a character in there, but sort of the events of this book are mentioned, as in like there's a trauma over Castle Rock. Of like, there's this guy who was just raping and killing these women. Now he's just committed suicide, and the guy's sort of in a closet, right? And it's kind of mentioned. And I think Sheriff Bannerman, I need to reread. I mean, I will be rereading Cujo because like last time I read it was like 18, but there was this Sheriff Bannerman is in this book as well. So you can see there's a, like, you can almost imagine, like, if you look at more of his books, you can see the Frank Dodd sort of connection that makes, in terms of like the King universe, it's kind of like a more interesting one, and actually you can turn it into more of a story, right?
And it works. Like, it's creepy, it's unsettling, it's about a serial killer, it's a good motivation. You can still do the whole thing of like, I don't want to do this because people are taking advantage of my powers, but then I can actually do some good with it. You can get creative. Like, you can take the passage that you read and try to translate it in film, and it can be like hard cutting, or like, there's like that sequence in Twin Peaks, the second season, where the light is shifting and Bob is turning into the main killer and all of that. Like, you can get so creative in doing those sequences. Instead of here, it's always usually just like, Christopher Walken wide-eyed.
Yeah, although like, he looks scary. I know, I get it. He looks eerie, and it's so nice to see Christopher Walken before he turned into a parody of himself, right?
Even though when he starts with quoting the Raven.
Oh,
the Raven still is sitting.
But it's very mild. You watch Biloxi Blues, which is just, I think, a few years later, and it's like, no, he's already in the...
He's far gone.
He's already done, But then I can imagine that the criticism would be like, you're adapting a book and you're taking a little piece out of it, and that will be the critique. And at the same, but I see how this could appeal to Cronenberg, and this becomes more of a, like Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. This would be the David Cronenberg's The Dead Zone, where you can see there's an opportunity to unsettle, to upset, right? Through visuals, through experience, through voyeurism. And I think like this is like, I'm watching this movie with the expectation almost of like, when are we, getting down to business? We're never going to get down to business, it turns out.
It happens once in the whole
with the Frank Dodd suicide, I think.
Yes.
Which is like if you ask me for my favorite scene, that's the scene.
I mean,
the scissors.
I also have it written down. I was like, it's like, oh yeah, this is really disturbing. And the twitching, like, it cuts to the body after, and it's just still, and then there's like a little twitch. It's like,
yeah.
There's David. It's like the only moment, like, Dina was was busy eating, having lunch. I don't know. That's when they shot that scene, because it feels inspired. It feels different. It has an edge, which is disappointing because the book has an edge to it. It's very upsetting in multiple ways during certain passages, but the film is sanded down, just like smooth. Like, this should not bother anyone. Like, we've simplified all the relationships, we've simplified all of the characters. I mean, I don't want to be here being like, oh, this tertiary character in the book was really memorable, but like the what's the actual term? Like the lady who's helping him recover as he's doing physical therapy in the hospital. The therapist, I don't know, physical therapist.
His physical therapist, yes.
She's memorable.
In the TV show, that they hired a black guy and he becomes his sidekick for a while. For an entire series. There's a guy who's just always with him. I'm like, oh, Johnny and your visions.
God. But in the book, like, she's a memorable character. She has presence. She is like, she's like snarky. She's like, there's this whole banter that they have. The whole sequence where he sees the vision and he's like trying to convince her, and she's going like running to the phone. Like it's exciting. It's thrilling. Then you watch it in the film. It's like over and done with. Yeah, she's not a character. She's
And
not
also-
a character. She's in service of the plot. Literally everyone pretty much is in service of the plot. The only true character is Greg Stillman because Martin Sheen is having fun with him.
Even with that, Stilson is also kind of like his evil comes out of nowhere.
It's cartoonish.
But it's just like, no, why is it? Oh, there's this guy. He's on posters or whatever. And there's this scene in an office when he just throws something at a guy when they threaten him. Just like, well, I think I need more than that. Than just a foreshadowing 20 minutes before the film ends.
No, you need the one scene. It's fine.
No, I think I need more. I need him to kill a dog, essentially. Not even as a child, but just like somewhere, kill an animal, just snap someone's neck. Do something, right? It's just like, but as you say, like this, like everything's telegraphed. Everything is at 200 miles an hour. Like even the sort of the scene where, I think even editing wise, it makes zero sense because he wakes up from the coma.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a conversation with his doctor, and he tells him that his mom's alive. And then there's a guy, just to position this in occupied Poland, says like, "Chodź tutaj," which means like, "Come here." That's it, right? So they found a Polish guy to say a few lines in the vision. But so he's awake, and then he cut to a scene where this nurse comes about, and he scares her because she thinks he's not awake. I'm like, why? He just had a conversation. He had a drink and everything.
Yeah, the doctor was ready for him. It was like, oh, we know he's gonna wake up soon or something.
Yeah.
The family was there. It's like, yeah. And they were not surprised. They were just happy. They're like, yeah, you're actually awake now. Nice.
So you almost want to kind of reverse these two things. I'm just editing wise, just put this sort of scene with the nurse, and he just wakes up out of nowhere, touches her, and he goes like, "Your child's on fire," and just or whatever. And then you go into this sort of like, "You've been a guest for a number of years," or whatever. Like it makes zero sense to me, like in terms of the story progression. And then I think about like, why is that? Oh, is it because it's a mess in the editing sort of post production, or is it because it doesn't matter because all that matters is the assassination at the end? And even with that, they kind of just make zero use of these visions, because in the book, one of the clever things was the filter over the vision that he had. It's like, what's this yellow and blue thing? Oh, I don't know. It's just, and turns out this was the sort of the jumpsuit. The sort of like you were looking at this through the kid.
Yeah.
And it's just that makes it a bit more inspired. Yeah. But they don't. Like sometimes he has visions without showing you the visions. Almost like, we don't have money to shoot this vision, so he just like, I don't know, touches someone. And he goes like, something terrible is gonna happen, or he just frowns, and you're like, oh no.
And like, if they make small changes. One that I forgot about is that in the book, everything that happens with the kid is teaching. I forget the name, Peter.
And he's older too,
Maybe.
because he's a senior in high school.
He's much older, and the whole thing is that they're basically, you mentioned the lightning rod salesman, like it connects to that because they're going to have prom or like a dance of some kind.
They have like a dance, yes, or some kind of a
gigantic bar
party
building, and Johnny has the vision that it's going to all burn down, and he has to convince everyone to not go, and he manages to save a few lives, and he has regret that he wasn't able to save everyone, and the accident still happened, and all of that. Like it's touching.
It plays into the finish line, right?
Yes. Also because, again, that's how he discovers slowly through in the book. It's a mixture of visions of the future, visions of the past, what has happened, what might happen, what will happen. How can he have those certainties? How can he know doing this or doing that is going to change anything? Like it's gripping. And that entire sequence, like the frustration and like trying to save those people because he knows this bad thing will happen, is gripping. And in here, they just change it to like, oh, he's going to play hockey, and their ice will break. The ice will break. So, okay. Just why? Also, there's a Carrie reference, which is cute in the book after that part. I think they mentioned Carrie in some way.
Yeah, and Yeah, there is one. I almost
I
forgot.
want to say it was actually the Carrie movie. Am I wrong? I think they mentioned the
I
Carrie
think, yeah, it's like, because someone was at the party at the house, like, he's like that woman in that film. Oh no, maybe the book. They mentioned the book.
or the book. It's one of those things. Like it's very cute. Just very cute.
But it's kind of nice, sort of
Also-
element of self mythology. But yeah,
It's very cinematic. It's a nice vision you could shoot instead of like, the body's falling through water. It lasts 2 shots or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just weird, some subtle changes. They're not the end of the world. We always talk about large changes, small changes. This one was just like, I don't know why they did that. More expensive to shoot, maybe. I don't know.
like, I don't know whether the script was kind of like cut or like written for like a 3-hour film, and they just cut nearly half of it, because there are elements in here that are kind of just left dangling. Like, he goes into this sort of gallery with his rifle and he drops a bullet, and we're kind of paying attention to this bullet, and it doesn't come back, right? It's just like, so I think it was the intention for this bullet to be found by some guy, and then now you have urgency because someone's looking for a shooter, right? So they will be on their way up as he needs to go and make a decision, because he needs to then stand up but it just feels like they've decided, no,
Pointless.
cut it out, pointless, fat, take it out, right? But they don't take out all of it. They just make some of these convenient turns. Like, as you say, like there's a journey to this character that you need to see him, why he becomes withdrawn from society, why he, like how he wrestles with the idea of, well, I actually do have powers over the future, because I can see what might happen, and what I see might not necessarily be real, because I've already seen this before. Like, I stopped this woman's child from dying, I stopped this from happening, from that from happening, whatever. And he starts realizing that if he doesn't do his job properly, people die. And that party was a pivotal hinge moment, right? And
Yes.
and they
It's because
cut it,
of that he pursues this assassination attempt.
but they replaced this with this of the lake and the hockey sort of moment, and they just tell me all about it. Like, there's this stuff like, do you want to go for your hockey training? No, I don't want to go, because Johnny said I'm gonna die, and he just plays his computer games. Or he's programming in Python. I don't know what he's doing. Right? I don't know what he's up to. But then cut to his dad is like just completely just ruined, because I think he went and then these kids died and whatever. And you're like, if you hadn't read the book, you'd be like, I don't know what's happening. I can infer that this is what's happening, and I don't know why it's happening, but because we then from there proceed to like the rally
as well. Like, there's a whole thing as well. It's like, oh, you're not seeing the child, he's not answering the phone, but then the kid comes into frame. Okay, it didn't go in the end. Everything's fine. It's like,
yeah, it's.
I will also add, I mean, no one's going to watch the Dead Zone expecting any grand political statement, but everything related to the politics in the book are so barely present in the film, outside of Martin Sheen being kind of a caricature of political figures of the time. There's so many elements about that in the book. Like, there's a whole sequence when Johnny wakes up for the first time, where he's being brought up to speed to everything that happened during the 70s and the Vietnam War and Nixon, etc., which is a nice scene. And there's a lot of politics talked about in that part. He's actively going, like later in the story, he's like actively going to political rallies just to shake hands, almost as a hobby.
Just to see.
Just to see. Oh my god, I forgot to write down. There is like a real politician that he meets.
Is it Jimmy Carter? No.
I think it's Jimmy. Oh, maybe I be Jimmy Carter. But there is one of those moments where it's like he actually inserts a real politician.
Because it's in the 70s, so I think he shakes the hand.
It's like 77, 78, I want to say something.
Because like I can't remember now. You have to remind me. So like Nixon steps down and Gerald Ford takes over, and then there's another election and Jimmy Carter wins, and I think this will be the election that he would be shaking people's hands with. So it's pre-Reagan, and it kind of foreshadows Reagan, right? Because Reagan was elected in 1980. So this would be
the book came out basically.
So after the book came out, right after the book came out. So you could see that this was kind of like the political rise of this Reaganite populism, right? This is kind of kind of captured in here. But you're right, and at the same time,
Cool. It's nice.
it doesn't come out of nowhere, because he actually starts taking more interest because he sees these other people. There's this Vietnamese guy who works for that billionaire guy.
Yes.
He's like his gardener or pool guy or something like this, and he's studying to become a citizen. He has a class, like civics class, and they go to these rallies, and he just hangs out with him almost. Because he has this pure idea of the American dream, and meanwhile he already knows, like, no, this is fun. So like there are intricacies and nuances that are just completely left out of the film, and you don't even necessarily have to spend too much time. It's just, I think there's very little character focus in here. It's almost like, how do we get to, like, what's the shortest distance between Johnny falling into a coma and Martin Sheen using a baby as a meat shield, you know?
It's cynical, but it's probably what happened. Like, you can almost picture the cards, right? They've like, okay, here's the full book. Take this out, take this out, take this out.
Yeah, and Dino De Laurentiis goes like, he's the storyboard. He goes like, I want this storyboard to be 10 cards or less.
Get to it. I don't care how.
I want 10 post-its on this wall. No more.
And yeah, I do have, like, in my mind, I have a potentially good option and a potentially bad option.
Okay.
The
TV, 6 seasons of TV.
I mean, that's like that's the reality of the situation. If someone wanted to make, like, the Mike Flanagan type version or whatever, I think a good version could genuinely be miniseries, 3 episodes.
Yep.
1 hour long,
but just
maybe slightly longer than 1 hour, and you make it so that it's like first part of the book until like coma saves the daughter's the therapist's home and daughter and blah blah blah. Like, you do that as the first part. Second part is just the killer. Third part is just Stillman. Whatever. You do that, and it's like, okay, you can focus in, you can sprinkle some of those elements in the previous parts. You can tease, you can foreshadow, you can do it similarly. Now the book is structured. Why is this scene here in the first episode? Oh, it pays off in the second one. Yeah. And you keep it a bit more like a TV movie, but like by today's standards type of TV movie, like high quality. The worst case scenario, you get 3 seasons where you get each of those things.
Yes.
And I can totally see that happening. Like 6 episodes just to get to the killer reveal in the second season or something.
Meanwhile, in the actual TV show, the killer is just 1 episode.
It's like, what's the first episode? I read some of it, like the main story is like the first 2 episodes or something.
Most of the book is like the first 2 episodes, and then you go into like, solving random crimes, and I think by the end of season 1, you see, I think this is season 1. Maybe I'm now missed, because they all blur. No, I think by the end of season 1, the season 1 ends on him meeting Greg Stilson and having a vision of the apocalypse.
Oh, okay.
And then,
is he like the bad guy, or like the ultimate bad guy? Or
he's like the ultimate bad guy. But with the TV show, they kind of structured it kind of sort of like the X-Files, where you see the first 2 episodes of the season are kind of sort of like, here's your main plot. We're coming back to something like Stilson's a part of it. There's a political whatever. So something's happening that you almost requires them to go like previously on the Dead Zone,
Yeah.
And then after these 2 initial episodes, you get like 8 episodes of filler, of like, he's on a plane and he has a vision that the plane's gonna crash. And he has to convince the pilot to do whatever, because the left phalange is gonna do something and the whatever, that's what you get. Or he's like, I don't know, saving some. And meanwhile, there's also like this sort of slowly unfolding drama with Sarah, and they've also merged,
of course,
2 characters, because Sheriff Bannerman and Walt Hazlitt are the same person. So Sarah is married to Walt Bannerman.
That's good drama.
Yeah, so there's this sort of the triangle, because and also the baby that she has, it's Johnny's baby. So she was pregnant when he went into a coma, and then she tells him that this is his baby. And then Walt Bannerman, so Walt Hazlitt, who's kind of affiliated with Stilson because he's on his ticket. She's just married to the sheriff, and then she starts working for Stilson campaign because it's a job. And
would you recommend it to me and the listeners, like to even try, or like no, save your time?
I would say there are, for King completists, but this is not like, I recommend it as, do not watch it like engaging with any engagement. I watch this on a small screen while I'm cooking, and I'm 3 seasons in, and so I just put my phone or a tablet somewhere in the background with like earphones in my ears, and I'm just like, I don't know, chopping carrots, and I'm watching this with one eye. But
Like a
there are
360
elements like there, like King trivia. There's one there's one episode where he needs to find a girl who's like the Firestarter girl. So there's like a King reference. And also there's an element in which he has like, there's like an Inception where he has a vision in 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 a vision. You know, or where they go to some kind of a place somewhere in deep rural Maine, and because he has visions, they think they're Satanists, so they're gonna burn them at the stake, you know. Because they need to solve a satanic crime, and then he ends up helping them solve the crime, you know. But like, it's so ridiculous because they actually end up like I told you off mic, like this sort of 6 episodes in, you kind of just forgo the entire sort of Weltschmerz of oh my god, how I'm going to live with this curse, because in the book it's a curse. He's afflicted with this. It's not a miracle that he gets
to take advantage of him.
It's a burden, right? But now he just walks around town and he's like a celebrity. And it's like, this is Johnny Smith. Like, there's like, oh, we followed your story. Do you mind touching my kids? This is an actual line. Do you mind touching my kids? You know? or then he has these intricate visions where he has to solve things like, and I don't know, he changes one thing and turns out, okay, this thing goes well, but this person dies, so I have to solve this now. And then he just has this sort of like intricate puzzle. He, like, in one episode, CIA hires him to kill Bin Laden.
Of course, he's gonna find him.
It's an episode that's kind of aired, I think, in 2002, so just after like the Afghan war, after like the Tora Bora campaign where they failed to kill Bin Laden. They just they have an episode where they put him in a room with other psychics trying to find which cave Bin Laden's in.
I'm very sad to say I was looking at some details about the show. Maybe it's a spoiler for you. It doesn't have a final ending.
No, I don't think. No, I think it's
cancelled.
I think it doesn't have a final ending, and actually, the ending from the book is part of like a parallel universe. So he has like an extended vision that takes place over an entire episode. So he sees like an other life where everybody else in the show has different lives. And this is where he imagines himself killing Stilson. And he comes out of this vision. And he sees, because instead of killing Stilson, he dies, right? So in the vision, he goes like, it's almost like this series gives you, I want to say this is like a season and a half in. So halfway through second season, again, one of the sort of the 6 episodes in an 18 episode season where you have the first 2 are main plot filler, and then another one, which will be this, and then the last 2 to set up another one, right? He has this sort of, it's almost like the show is making a statement that we don't feel any obligations towards the book. This show is going to go its own way. The book, what's in the book is part of our vision. It's like an alternate universe, and we're not going to follow that. So it's going to go elsewhere. So it's wild, but yeah, it's and also just like you watch one episode and you'll see, and how this series is based on a film, not on the book, because they hired Anthony Michael Hall, who looks like, you know, Christopher Walken you have at home.
Yeah, in the early 2000s especially.
Yeah, and then Brooke Adams is essentially like a visual inspiration for the actress who plays Sarah, because she looks exactly like that, but down to the hairstyle. And imagine Tom Skerritt without the mustache. That's your sheriff. I can't remember. He looks slightly like Scott Dracula. What's his name?
Michael Hall plays Johnny Smith.
Yep.
Nicole DeBoer, what I've seen in Cube. I don't think I've seen her in anything else. Plays Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Bruno plays Sheriff.
Yeah, just see his picture and you'll know. Like, it looks like it's the cast of, like, how do we imitate the cast of the 1983 film without paying anyone more than a sandwich?
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So, it's like you take material like this, fertile as it is, and as you say, like, you can turn this into a 3-episode miniseries, 2 hours each, or a 6-part 1 hour each miniseries that you air on Netflix, on Disney Plus or Disney Plus.
Yeah.
And you can kind of just structure it so you have meaningful micro of cliffhangers and still 3 major cliffhangers, as in, so you still maintain the sort of quote unquote the sort of the ancient Greek 3-act structure, right? The classical sort of way of doing it, and it would work much better because you actually do end up like spending time with these characters. But this is something that needs to happen now, because you do that in 2002, you'd have to like hog time make Garrus and put him in a closet so he wouldn't get his hands on it.
Yeah.
So it would ruin
Or
it.
you get something like that. We talked about the Salem's Lot made for TV movie, which is like they modernize it in ways that don't really make sense, but also it is definitely a better adaptation than most. It's like weird.
Yeah, but because like these, like, I don't know, maybe this is just me. Maybe our storytelling sort of sensibilities have gotten sophisticated over time, because there's essentially a 43-year sort of difference between now and how David Cronenberg's film came together.
Yeah.
There's just a progression in how we perceive storytelling and how much thematic depth you can imbue in a film. And I mean, this had been like stuff like this had been done before, but it would have been lauded as worthy of note, right? Now it's kind of, I don't know, I find it easier, right? So maybe now would be the time, because it, like, you look at a book like this, and maybe this is the case for many of Stephen King's books, which are perceived by a lot of people, this is just genre shit, this is junk food, so let's just take the most obvious sort of touch points from this book and just turn this into a movie and this will work. But there's a lot of context, there's a lot of character nuance and detail that turns these stories into sort of like multi-dimensional tapestries that show you how, like, the guy is essentially a chronicler of American sort of working class in many ways. He shows the interactions between characters like Sarah and Johnny and the sheriff, his mother, and just outlines these sort of relation, like these societal sort of like connections between politics, religion, affiliation to your own community, right? It's all kind of just gives you this feeling that you almost maybe, I don't know, fool yourself into believing that you kind of understand the country that this book is taking place in. I think this is important, and people just overlook it. They just look for the sort of, where's the creepy shit, where's the vampire, where's the ghosts, that's it.
It's
or
not the heart of the story.
pare it down and sand it down, right?
Yeah. And even with that's probably the last thing I want to talk about is like the mother character. Like, her presence looms through the entire book. The shadow of who she was, what she did, how she died. Like, Johnny feels guilty indirectly killing her, not being there for her in the last moments, and like all of it is,
She tells her, like, tell mom to tell her to take her pills, right?
Yeah, just like serious character moments, character drama that affects the protagonist for the entire novel.
In the film, I had no idea that she died. I was just like, is she dead?
She just like has a stroke in front of the TV, and that's it. She gets too stressed.
Yeah, I'm like,
She's
that's...
done. I don't think it's mentioned again later on.
It's like ask a 15-year-old to quickly recount the events of the Dead Zone in front of the class. And then she died. It's like, you know what it is? Like my okay, in year 5, my daughter, they were doing William Shakespeare's Macbeth in year 5.
Oh wow!
They were doing Macbeth, but the production of Macbeth was 20 minutes long.
This is how it feels, kind of.
And this is how it feels, like a 20-minute sort of primary school production of the Dead Zone. The film, that is, right?
What do you need to know about the story? This is it.
That's it, you know.
It's all plot, no character. But I mean, we kind of already answered the usual final questions, but just for the fun of it, we both really love the scissor scene. We said it's our highlight in the film. Do both of us have one other scene that we liked? Can we think of one?
I have one that's funny and one that's actually quite cool. So when these are not scenes, they are just almost like visuals. The funny visual is Martin Sheen holding a baby like he's presenting the Lion King in front of him.
Comparison.
And the visual, the image of the screaming tunnel, where they find Frank Dodds is sort of like, oh, they go to look for him, right? But the sort of visual and the sort of the camera's, I think, on a crane where it just swoops down very slowly, and there's because the sort of the walls of it are wet, so I'm not sure if they just naturally were wet or they would sprinkle them with water, so they would reflect the snow underneath and ice. So it almost looks like a black and white shot. Kind of find it cool.
It's a stunning shot. I made it my backdrop on the review.
There you go.
It's a cool shot. There's a few of those. I have to say I do like, just because it's the first time it happens, it's kind of a striking image. When Johnny wakes up and has the vision of the nurse's home burning and the daughter, and it's just like he's sitting in the bed surrounded by flames. There's something kind of eerie about that image. It's a shame that most of the other visions don't really reach that level. You mentioned the one of the Nazis in Poland, and it's just this bombastic set piece that's probably they wasted so much money on that, but they could have used it elsewhere. No offense to the character or anything about that. It's just like, yeah, it's cool, but we're spending 5 minutes on this probably because you spent a lot of money on it. You really wanted to be in the film. But of all the things you could have cut from the story, you show that. It's fine. It's fine. And I think, the ending is okay. I think, the beats are there. It's nice that Sarah is present. It adds that extra emotional depth, even though I don't really feel it. Do you have any final thoughts then, Jakub? We would normally ask which version do you prefer, but I think, once again, we both prefer the book.
I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I think, I want to echo your sort of idea, and I think this is maybe a call to arms. Whoever's listening to this who's in a position to influence Mike Flanagan to get off his ass, and after or maybe not to sit down when he's done with Carrie,
I think to kind of just... Other shows already, am I wrong? I want to say new King shows adaptations were confirmed a few weeks ago.
I think there's also going to be a surge, because unfortunately this guy's life is going to come to an end eventually, right? And there's going to be a surge of what do we want to do to celebrate this guy's life? And in a way there's going to be an onslaught, right? But
True.
Get a guy like Flanagan, or Flanagan is probably one of the I think the one remaining, I want to say, sort of Kingsman. And actually, we didn't mention this. There was a string of these politically sort of Rage. Apt Pupil was kind of around the time, in early 80s. That's kind of political violence.
True.
But yeah, can we get someone who actually knows what they're talking about, and they appreciate the book for what it is, to convert it into a piece of cinema, or either a film or a miniseries. Probably a miniseries is probably the better bet, and give this book a treatment that it deserves, because like many of King's books, this has been unfairly treated.
Yeah, and I don't want to be too excessive. Of course, we have talked about good film adaptations, but generally King, unless it's a shorter story, it's hard for it to really work well or be faithful and all of that in a 2-hour film. Because otherwise, some of the most popular ones, why is it The Mist? Shawshank Redemption. I think Misery is an exception, but even Stand By Me, it's they were novellas. They were already shorter stories by design.
Like you say, Misery, almost 100 pages in the Misery is the fake book in the book.
I've not read Misery yet, so I don't know.
So there's the book he writes while imprisoned is there,
Okay.
isn't it? So you can read the book in the book. And yeah, like books like Cujo, quite simple. Christine, quite simple. Firestarter, probably more involved because there's a lot more plot, but it's still simple enough that you can condense it into a film.
Carrie as well, honestly.
Carrie is so it's possible, but like there are books like this maybe, or The Stand is even bigger, right? There are books that take place and or they take space in time, you know, that require, and they do it for a reason. It's not like the guy goes like, I just love the 70s, you know. I just think there's especially now you can almost see this almost like a fuck you to Trump, you know, just do it now.
Yeah. Like I remember when I watched it 2018, of course he was already in office, so there were multiple parallels when I watched it and then reading some reviews around that time. I think now I don't know if it's probably too much though, in a way. I think we've reached the point where we see so many Trump inserts in popular media, especially American channels and shows, that I don't know if we need it.
I don't know if we need it, but I think if that's what the culture feels like doing, then because it's a powerful, like, you know, like there's a reason why we see so many eat the rich satires, because that's one of the biggest problems people channel through their work, right? That's what resonates. So I think this also resonates. And if you think about, like, the guy had an assassination attempt at his life, and you imagine, like, this was like, what if this was a Johnny Smith kind of character? Like, imagine this, almost do like a stealth the Dead Zone adaptation about the guy who thinks he has a vision because this guy's going to start a war that's going to go like just get out of hand very quickly, like he just did, actually.
Like he's doing. Like, I don't know. That's the crazy thing. Like, we are recording this episode mid-March.
Week 2 of the Iran war.
We don't know what's gonna happen by the time it's released. So, you know, in case the world goes even further to shit, we didn't know. I mean, we knew. We didn't know.
And we did nothing.
On this hopeful and optimistic final note, Jakub, thank you for joining me to talk about some more King stuff. Do you have anything that you would like to plug? Do you want to share where listeners can find your writing and also your other podcast?
All right. Okay. So writing, you can go on my website, flashonfilm.com, FLASZ This is where I write my reviews, my review adjacent sort of tirades, my essays. That's kind of like the big hub of what I'm doing as a writer. Also go on uncutgems.podcast.com. That's kind of the main hub for where the show lives. So this is a show that we run now with Randy, like, and Nick, you used to be a sort of a series regular and a co-host, right? And before committing full time to filmmaking, right? But yeah, go and listen to that. This is where we talk every week. There's an episode about a movie that, you know, kind of slightly off the beaten track or with some problematic sort of history of either being poorly received or a box office bomb or something like that.
And you're going through the 80s this year.
And we're going through the 80s this year, that's right. So
that's no episode happening sometime in the future.
Look, the cards. I pitched it to Randy to do in like somewhere towards the end of the year, do like a month of 80s Stephen King adaptations, but he needs to bite.
Okay.
so that's something that needs to happen. Because I could see this, and then also because we also have a Patreon channel where there's like a add-on to all these conversations about more sort of well-known films. That's somewhere where you can go and support and listen to more stuff that we do. So yeah, follow me on social media, Jakub Flasz on Blue Sky and Letterboxd, and at Flash on Film also, where the sort of the website lives. So my sort of film-related work kind of lives there. This is kind of where I'm the most active, if I'm active at all. So like your Blue Sky, your X, Facebook, Instagram, and recently TikTok and YouTube. So just dabbling my toes, see where it sticks. You know, like trying to see if I can attract people to read my work and say, this is actually quite nice. You know, I'm gonna stay and read more. Although I don't know, maybe this is a fool's errand because people don't like to read. So I don't know. But yeah, that's kind of where I live.
You can do the audiobook version of each article. Or
It's not a bad
turn it into
idea.
a YouTube video that might.
It's not a bad idea.
All links to these projects, these websites are in the links of the show below. Meanwhile, you can follow me everywhere at MickeyGrow97. You can follow the podcast on Instagram at Anatomy of Adaptation Pod to stay up to date with all upcoming episodes. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a lovely day, and we hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.